In the quiet of the afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, something extraordinary happened in the Miller household. The 6-month-old paralyzed baby, Oliver, had just fallen asleep, his breaths soft and rhythmic, a peaceful contrast to the day's earlier chaos. Nearby, unnoticed yet watchful, the family's new puppy, Charlie, lay with his ears perked up, sensing a shift in the air. What he did next would be talked about in hushed, awed tones for years to come. It was nothing short of a miracle, and it all started with the gentle sound of a baby's slumber. Tom barely registered the incessant ringing of the doorbell as he delved into the complex world of coding. The sound sliced through the quiet of their Maple Street home, persistent and urgent. It wasn't until the 4th ring that he realized it demanded his attention. Reluctantly, he peeled himself away from his computer screen, his mind still tangled in lines of code. As he swung the door open, the sight that greeted him snatched his breath away. A young woman, disheveled and clearly distressed, stood before him. Her eyes, wide with a tumultuous mix of fear and desperation, locked onto his with an intensity that rooted him to the spot. Clutched tightly against her chest was a baby, wrapped in a faded blue blanket, its tiny fists balled up against the cold. "Please," she stammered, her voice cracking as tears streamed down her cheeks. "I can't take care of him anymore." Her words hung heavily in the air, laden with unspoken stories of hardship and despair. Tom's heart twisted in his chest. The woman's appearance, her tired eyes, the desperation in her voice, evoked a deep sense of sympathy within him. Yet, confusion swirled through his mind, muddling his thoughts. Who was she? Why choose him? His gaze drifted to the baby, whose soft cooing seemed so out of place in the thick tension of the moment. Before he could formulate a response, the woman thrust the baby into his arms, along with a crumpled letter. The weight of the child in his hands felt monumental, as if he was suddenly holding not just a baby, but the weight of an entire life. "Take care of him," she whispered, then turned and hurried away, her figure quickly swallowed up by the distance. Tom stood frozen, the baby resting against his chest, the letter crinkled in his grip. A myriad of emotions cascaded through him: shock, fear, confusion. His mind raced, trying to process the surreal nature of the encounter. It was only the baby's gentle burbling that kept him anchored in the moment. Just then, Grace pulled into the driveway. Fresh off a long shift at the hospital, she was looking forward to an evening of quiet relaxation. Her steps faltered as she caught sight of Tom standing in the doorway, a baby in his arms. Her eyes widened in disbelief, 1,000 questions already forming. "Tom, what—" Her voice trailed off as she approached, her mind teetering between confusion and concern. The scene before her was so far removed from the ordinary that it seemed almost dreamlike. Without a word, Tom handed her the letter. As Grace unfolded the crumpled paper, her eyes scanning the hastily written words, the gravity of their new reality began to sink in. Her gaze shifted from the letter to the baby and back to Tom, a silent understanding passing between them. This was their new beginning, unexpected and overwhelming. The challenges were immense, but in that moment, united by a mutual resolve, they stood ready to face whatever lay ahead. Grace's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the crumpled letter, her eyes darting over the uneven scrawl of ink. Tom stood beside her, cradling the baby gently, his expression unreadable but tense. The weight of the moment pressed down on both of them, a sense of urgency mixed with unease. The letter began with a heartfelt apology. The woman explained how she had reached a breaking point. She described the baby, named Oliver, and his condition, paralyzed from the waist down since birth. With no family to support her and a father who had abandoned them the moment he learned of Oliver's disability, her life had spiraled into hopelessness. Every word carried the burden of her guilt and desperation, a mother's love tangled with the anguish of being unable to provide. Grace's brow furrowed as she read further. The woman had specifically chosen them. She recounted a brief encounter with Grace at the hospital months ago, recalling the kindness Grace had shown her during her delivery. That fleeting moment had left an impression so strong that the woman believed Grace and Tom were the only ones capable of giving Oliver the life he deserved. "She knew who I was," Grace murmured, her voice barely audible, as though speaking louder might shatter the fragile moment. Tom shifted, his gaze flickering between Grace and the baby. "She saw something in us, something we didn't even see coming," he said, his voice steady but low. The letter ended with a legal document granting them custody of Oliver. It was sudden, unconventional, and entirely overwhelming. The absence of a birth certificate left them with questions, but there was no ambiguity in the mother's plea for them to care for her son. Grace folded the letter slowly, letting out a long breath. She looked down at Oliver, who was now sleeping peacefully in Tom's arms, oblivious to the storm surrounding him. His tiny face was serene, a stark contrast to the turmoil the adults felt. "He's just a baby," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "He didn't ask for this, and she's right. He needs us." Tom hesitated, a mix of fear and determination flashing across his face. "This is bigger than us, Grace. We weren't prepared for this." "Whoever is," Grace replied gently. "But that doesn't mean we walk away." Tom met her gaze, and for a moment the room was silent, except for Oliver's soft breaths. They were standing on the edge of a decision that would change everything, but in that instant the choice became clear. "We'll figure it out," Tom said firmly, a note of resolve entering his voice. "Whatever it takes, we'll make this work." Grace nodded, her lips pressing into a thin but determined line. She reached out to touch Oliver's cheek, the simple gesture carrying the weight of a promise. They were now his parents, not by blood, but by choice, and they would face the challenges ahead together. Their world had shifted irreversibly, but as they exchanged a glance, a quiet understanding settled between them. They were ready to embrace this unexpected chapter of their lives, bound by a shared purpose and an unspoken vow to give Oliver the love and care he deserved. The arrival of Charlie, a scruffy and timid puppy, added a new layer of complexity to the Miller household. Grace had found him shivering in the backyard one chilly morning, his fur matted and his eyes wide with apprehension. Without hesitation, she scooped him into her arms and brought him into the warmth of their home, a place already adjusting to its new reality with Oliver. As Grace introduced Charlie to their home, the puppy's initial reaction was to cower behind her legs, his tail tucked between his legs. It was clear that his past experiences hadn't been kind, and trust was not something he gave freely. Grace's heart went out to him, seeing a reflection of vulnerability that she had also sensed in Oliver. Tom, while supportive, was initially hesitant about the idea of taking in a puppy, especially with the overwhelming responsibility of caring for Oliver. However, seeing Grace's determination and the immediate connection she felt with Charlie, he relented, agreeing that perhaps the puppy could indeed bring some joy and normalcy to their strained lives. The first few days were a mix of chaos and adjustments. Oliver, curious yet immobile, would watch wide-eyed as Charlie cautiously explored each corner of the house. Grace and Tom worked to create a safe space for both the baby and the puppy, setting up barriers and child-proofing areas while also laying out comfortable blankets and toys for Charlie. Despite their efforts, it was clear that Charlie was struggling with the presence of Oliver. Whenever Oliver's coos and giggles filled the room, Charlie would retreat to a corner, his ears pinned back and his body tense. Grace noticed this behavior and worried about the impact it might have on both Oliver and Charlie. She made a mental note to monitor their interactions closely, hoping that with time, Charlie would understand that Oliver meant no harm. The dynamics within the house shifted as they all adapted to each other's presence. Grace took on the role of mediator and comforter, soothing Charlie's fears while ensuring Oliver received all the attention he needed. Tom found himself juggling his work and his new responsibilities at home, often feeling stretched thin but determined to provide for his family. One afternoon, as Tom worked from his makeshift office in the living room, he watched Grace interacting with both Oliver and Charlie. She spoke softly to Charlie, encouraging him to come closer to Oliver, who was propped up with pillows on a playmat. Hesitantly, Charlie edged forward, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air around Oliver. The moment was delicate, a fragile bridge being built between the two. Grace held her breath as Charlie finally inched closer to Oliver, his body still tense, but curiosity winning over fear. Slowly, he allowed Oliver to touch his fur, a gentle interaction that Grace hoped would mark the beginning of a new understanding between them. However, just as Charlie seemed to relax, Oliver's hand moved too quickly, startling him. Charlie let out a soft growl, his body stiffening instantly. Grace intervened quickly, scooping Charlie up and offering soothing words, but the warning signs were clear. That evening, as they discussed the day, Grace and Tom realized that integrating Charlie into their family would require more patience and attention than they had anticipated. The initial bonding session had shown promise, but Charlie's discomfort around Oliver posed a challenge they needed to address thoughtfully. Determined to make it work for the sake of both Oliver and Charlie, they agreed on a plan to gradually increase their supervised interactions, hoping to foster trust and understanding. The path ahead was uncertain, but their commitment to their new family, both human and canine, remained steadfast. As the days lengthened into weeks, Tom took it upon himself to build a stronger bond with Charlie, hopeful that his efforts would ease the puppy's integration into the family. Early morning walks became their special time. The quiet streets offered a calm backdrop for Tom to gently coax Charlie out of his shell. He spoke to him in soft, encouraging tones, rewarding each small act of trust with treats and gentle pats. Over time, Charlie's tail began to wag more frequently, and his hesitant steps turned into eager tugs on the leash. Meanwhile, Grace focused on Oliver's needs, scheduling follow-up visits to monitor his condition and ensure his development stayed on course. The uncertainty of Oliver's future loomed large in her thoughts, but she masked her worries with a smile whenever she bathed or fed him, maintaining a soothing routine that Oliver seemed to find comforting. On a particularly sunny morning, after returning from his walk with Charlie, Tom noticed a subtle but significant change in the atmosphere of their home. Charlie, who had started to watch Oliver with curious, less wary eyes, ventured closer to the baby's playmat on his own. Tom held his breath, watching as Charlie lay down next to Oliver, his body relaxed and his head resting near Oliver's hand. It was a small victory, but a profound one, signaling that Charlie might finally be feeling at home. Emboldened by this progress, Tom decided it was time to reassess Oliver's medical condition. The initial diagnosis of paralysis was heart-wrenching, but each new day brought with it a flicker of hope. Together, Tom and Grace took Oliver to the pediatric neurologist, a visit they hoped would shed light on any potential for recovery. In the sterile calm of the doctor's office, they watched anxiously as Oliver underwent a series of gentle examinations. The doctor's face was impassive as he worked, leaving Tom and Grace clinging to each other's hands, searching for reassurance in the uncertainty. Finally, the doctor turned to them, his expression softening. "I have some potentially good news," he began, pausing to gauge their reaction. While Oliver's condition initially seemed permanent, his latest tests show significant neural activity in the lower regions of his spine. This activity could indicate a capacity for some degree of recovery. The room seemed to spin for a moment as the words sank in. Grace felt a surge of relief so strong it nearly brought her to tears. Tom squeezed her hand, a silent vow passing between them to cling to this new hope. "There's still a lot we need to do," the doctor continued. "Physical therapy will be crucial, and it will be a long journey, but there's a real possibility that Oliver could regain some mobility." The news felt like a beacon of light in the fog of uncertainty they had been navigating. As they left the doctor's office, Grace and Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose. They discussed plans for Oliver's therapy, their conversation buzzing with a cautious optimism that had been absent for too long. Back at home, as they shared the news with their families over video calls, Charlie lay beside Oliver's crib, his presence a quiet comfort. The puppy's gradual acceptance of Oliver and the hopeful prognosis intertwined, strengthening the fabric of their family life. Each step forward, no matter how small, felt like a testament to their resilience and love, a love that was growing and deepening with every challenge they faced together. Buoyed by the promising news of Oliver's potential recovery, Tom and Grace threw themselves into a new routine centered around Oliver's physical therapy sessions. Their days were packed, juggling medical appointments, work, and caring for both Oliver and Charlie, who had become an increasingly inseparable companion to the baby. However, the undercurrent of worry never fully subsided, a reminder of the fragile state of their son's health. Late one evening, as Grace was preparing dinner, a sudden shrill cry from Oliver shattered the semblance of normalcy they had cultivated. Dropping everything, she rushed to his side, finding him flushed and feverish. His small body trembled with each wail, a stark contrast to his usual cheerful babbling. Panic clutched at her heart as she scooped him up, trying to soothe him with her calmest voice, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. "Tom!" she called out urgently. "We need to go to the hospital now." Tom, who had been helping Charlie settle down for the night, ran into the room, his face paling at the sight of Oliver's distress. Without a word, he grabbed their emergency bag and helped Grace secure Oliver into his car seat. The drive to the hospital was tense, with both parents exchanging worried glances as Oliver's cries filled the car. Upon arrival, they were rushed into the emergency room, where nurses and doctors quickly took over, their efficient movements a blur to Tom and Grace's anxious eyes. As medical personnel worked to stabilize Oliver, Grace held Tom's hand tightly, her other hand stroking Oliver's forehead, whispering words of comfort. The wait for news seemed interminable, the hospital's antiseptic smell mingling with the heavy silence that hung between them. Finally, a doctor approached them, his expression one of cautious optimism. Oliver's condition was due to a high fever, likely from an infection, he explained. "We've managed to bring the fever down, and he's responding well to the antibiotics. It was a serious scare, but he's a strong little boy. We'll need to keep him overnight for observation, but things are looking hopeful." Relief washed over Tom and Grace as they listened to the doctor. Though the episode had been a harrowing reminder of Oliver's vulnerability, the reassurance that it was manageable and not directly linked to his existing condition allowed them to breathe easier. As they sat by Oliver's hospital crib, watching him slowly drift back to sleep, their fears subsided, replaced by a renewed sense of gratitude for the resilience of their little boy. After the frightening hospital visit, Oliver's health gradually improved, and the family settled back into their routine with a deeper appreciation for each moment. Grace often found herself watching Oliver and Charlie, marveling at the bond that had formed between them. Charlie, once wary and distant, now seemed to sense whenever Oliver needed companionship, often curling up beside his crib or playmat. One quiet afternoon, as Tom worked in his home office and Grace was in the kitchen preparing snacks, a scene unfolded that would forever change their understanding of Charlie's role in their lives. Oliver, now more active, was playing in his specially adapted play area, a space designed to keep him safe and stimulate his development. Charlie was outside, basking in the sun, but he kept one eye on the back door, his instincts attuned to the sounds coming from inside. Suddenly, a soft thud echoed through the house, followed by a silence that was more alarming than the noise itself. Inside, Oliver had managed to shift his position, trying to reach a toy just beyond his usual grasp. His movements, usually so careful and measured, had unbalanced him, and he began to slip through the gap between the safety bars of his play area. Charlie's ears perked up at the sound, and with a speed that belied his usual calm demeanor, he darted inside. Tom, hearing the disturbance, rushed from his office just in time to see Charlie nudging Oliver gently with his nose, trying to stabilize the baby and push him back to safety. Oliver, teetering at an awkward angle, was moments away from a fall that could have resulted in serious injury. "Oliver!" Tom exclaimed, his voice filled with panic as he sprinted towards the play area. He arrived just as Charlie managed to push Oliver safely away from the edge. Tom scooped Oliver up into his arms, checking him over frantically for any sign of injury. Finding none, he looked down at Charlie, who sat wagging his tail, his eyes locked on Oliver. "Good boy, Charlie! Good boy!" Tom praised, his relief palpable. He knelt down to stroke Charlie, his hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline and gratitude flooding through him. Grace, alerted by Tom's shout, rushed into the room, her eyes wide with concern. As Tom recounted what had happened, her gaze shifted between Oliver and Charlie, tears of relief mingling with pride. "That was amazing, Charlie," Grace said, kneeling beside Tom to hug the puppy. "You really are a part of this family, aren't you?" The incident not only strengthened their bond with Charlie, but also deepened their family's connection. That evening, as they sat together in the living room, Oliver giggling as Charlie gently licked his hand, Tom and Grace shared a quiet look of understanding. The day's events had revealed the profound loyalty and love that Charlie held for Oliver, traits that had turned the scruffy puppy into a true hero. The family had witnessed a miracle, not just in Oliver's rescue, but in the realization of the deep connections that could form between them all. They knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together with Charlie by their side, a steadfast guardian in their midst. In the weeks that followed, the Millers grew more comfortable in their roles, each day weaving deeper ties of love and responsibility. Their routine had normalized into a rhythm that felt both challenging and rewarding. However, the unexpected return of Oliver's birth mother threatened to unravel the stability they had worked so hard to build. It was a crisp autumn morning when the doorbell echoed through the Miller's home, a sound that now seemed to herald significant changes. Tom opened the door to find a woman standing on their porch, her posture hesitant but determined. It took only a moment for him to recognize her as the woman who had left Oliver in their care. The shock of seeing her again rendered him momentarily speechless. "Tom, who is it?" Grace called from the kitchen, sensing the tension in his silence. "It's her, the woman who—" Tom's voice trailed off as he struggled to process her sudden appearance. Grace quickly appeared at the door, her eyes widening in recognition and confusion. The birth mother, Carla, looked between Tom and Grace, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and resolve. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Carla said quickly, her voice trembling. "I just needed to see that he was okay, to see that I made the right choice." The conversation that followed was tense, with Tom and Grace grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. Carla explained that she had sought help, gotten her life somewhat back on track, and now felt a compelling need to ensure Oliver's well-being. Her return opened old wounds for Grace and Tom, reminding them of the precarious beginnings of their journey as parents. Despite the initial shock, Tom and Grace listened as Carla shared her progress and her gratitude towards them. She made it clear she did not intend to reclaim Oliver, but needed to see for herself that he was in a loving home. As they talked, the tension slowly eased, replaced by a cautious understanding. Carla's visit, while unexpected, brought a certain closure to her chapter in Oliver's life story. As Carla prepared to leave, reassured by Oliver's happy giggles and the evident love in the home, Grace turned to Tom with a smile tinged with new excitement. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," she whispered, her hand resting gently on her abdomen. "We're going to have another baby." Tom's eyes lit up with joy and surprise, and together they shared a moment of profound connection. The challenges of the past seemed to pave the way for this new joy, adding another layer to their evolving family story, full of hope and new beginnings. As autumn gave way to the crisp beginnings of winter, the Miller family found themselves reflecting on the tumultuous year that had reshaped their lives in ways they never could have imagined. The house was quiet, with Oliver and Charlie both asleep, providing Tom and Grace a rare moment of stillness to contemplate their journey and the future unfolding before them. Sitting together on the couch, wrapped in the comfort of a shared blanket, they spoke softly about the changes ahead. Grace's pregnancy was progressing well, and with each passing day, their excitement grew alongside their apprehension about the challenges of having two young children. Do you think we're ready for this? Grace asked, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Tom took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. We've managed everything life has thrown at us so far, he replied. We'll handle this the same way we did with Oliver, together. Their conversation meandered through the lessons they had learned since Oliver's arrival. Resilience, they agreed, was forged not in the absence of struggle, but through the very act of navigating it. They had learned to adapt quickly, to support each other unconditionally, and to embrace the unpredictability of life with a sense of hope rather than fear. Grace reflected on the initial fear of the unknown that had gripped her when Oliver first came into their lives. I was so scared, she admitted. But look at us now. We've built a family on foundations of love and acceptance. It's stronger than I ever imagined. Tom nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and contemplation. We've been through so much. Every challenge, every scare with Oliver, and even Charlie's arrival. They've all taught us more about love and commitment than I thought possible. As they discussed their plans and hopes for the future, the strength of their bond was palpable. The conversation turned to how they would introduce Oliver to the idea of a sibling and how Charlie might react to another new addition to the family. We'll make sure they both know how loved they are, Tom said decisively. No matter what, that's the most important thing. As the night deepened, they sat in comfortable silence, each lost in thoughts of the past and dreams for the future. The trials they had faced had prepared them for the joys and challenges still to come. They knew that life would continue to be unpredictable, but they faced that unpredictability as a united front, strengthened by the bonds of their little, growing family. In those quiet moments, as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall outside, blanketing the world in white, Tom and Grace felt a profound gratitude for their journey. They had discovered an unshakable strength in themselves and each other, a strength that would guide them through whatever adventures lay ahead, bound by love and fortified by the experiences that had brought them to this point. The future was uncertain, but they knew they would face it together, as a family. As the gentle snow continued to fall, casting a serene glow over the world outside, the Miller family sat together, their hearts full and their spirits lifted by the bond they shared. It was a bond forged through challenges and strengthened by love, a reminder that even in the face of life's unpredictability, they could find joy and resilience. This story, a testament to the power of family, hope, and miracles, resonates with anyone who has faced the unexpected and found strength they never knew they had. We hope this story has touched your heart as it has ours. If it has, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment that brought your family closer together? What was your miracle? Let us know. Your stories inspire us to keep sharing, and every like, comment, and subscription helps us bring more stories like this to you. Thank you for being a part of our community, and remember, through the highs and lows, we are stronger together. See you in the next video.